Hey friends, welcome back. KJ4YZI with HamRadioConcepts. Just a quick little blurb video I thought would be just kind of fun, maybe entertaining. I had the chance of being in the studio with Big Jim Edwards on the big one, 5.085 WTWW, which is a 100,000 watt shortwave station on AM in a 60 meter band that covers all 7 continents and has a lot of ham content on there. And for those who are not or who are into shortwave or who are not into shortwave, you should still check it out somehow. A lot of radios now have a receiver, full range receiver that you can dial down to 5.085, and Big Jim is on Sundays at 9 to 11. But I had the opportunity just to chat with him, and rather than putting the whole 2-hour segment between the good old fashioned rock and roll, I got the audio clips from there in MP3, and I'm just going to put them together and just listen. Maybe this answers a couple of questions. Maybe you can see, what it's like, how I speak when someone just comes off the cuff and says, hey, I want to ask you, I want to have you as like a guest host on the show. I didn't see it coming. Of course, I never script anything, and I think it'd be fun just for you to listen. They're only about 3 minutes a piece, and I'll just put them all together right now, and you can see. But if you want to check out his station, 5.085 WTWW, the big one, Big Jim Edwards.
Ham Radio Concepts. Big Jim Edwards here at 5085 WTWW. It was field day weekend, and my golly, everybody I know was out there doing the dots and dashes and sideband and all of that stuff. And hope you're now with us and just kind of relaxing a little bit. And it's an honor for me. I know many of you are also checking out the YouTube videos from Ham Radio Concepts, and for me to have Eric KJ4YZI in the studio is really a treat. He's here, and Eric, one of the things I was always thrilled about was the fact that, people always say, oh, ham radio's a bunch of gray-haired old guys with glasses at the end of their nose, and you're a young guy. You got into ham radio just a little while ago, and the next thing you know, you're at your top of the game and now got so many thousands and thousands of subscribers. So tell me a little bit about the journey, man. How'd you get started in this goofy, wonderful, wide, wonderful world of ham radio?
Well, let me tell you, Jim, it's a pleasure to be with you, by the way. And so I started in CB radio when I was 9 years old. My 10th birthday present, I wanted a CB radio. And I asked my father, because he was into CB radio back then, and he was kind of puzzled and scratched his head and says, you want what? And he saw me have interest in radio. So that was my 10th birthday present. And at that point, I started playing with CB radio and learning about, what radio is and what it does. Now, that was 20, almost 30 years ago. And at that point, when you have friends at 10 years old and say, hey man, check out the CB radio, they have no idea what this is. They're like, well, don't you play video games? Don't you read comic books? So I didn't find anybody that had interest like I did. And then fast forward years later, after playing with CB radio, I had a friend, Patrick, KI4LUY. He's still my friend. And one day I met him on the CB and we were talking, and he said, you got to come over and check this out. And I came over to his house, and he said, watch this. And he pushed the button, the PTT button, on the microphone of his ham radio. And he was on an FM repeater. And the repeater came back and said, W4PHJ repeater. And it gave the time. And I was hooked right then. I said, oh my gosh, it talks to you. He says, this is way more than CB radio. At that point, I was hooked because he had been at ham radio many years. And so that was about when I was 18. Now, fast forward 2 years from then, about 20 years old, I was getting my technician class license. And at that point, the radio hobby as we know it today is not like it was when my father or grandfather was around. There's so many things that are evolving. And every time I would get on the radio or talk to people, I always wanted to experiment. I wanted to know why, how can I do this? I buy this antenna, what can I make it do? And a lot of the answers I got was, no, you don't do that. Just go buy this and be done with it. Well, I wasn't satisfied with that answer. So I started homebrewing and burning radios up and losing antennas and spending a lot of money and not knowing what I was doing, but I learned from it. And at that point, I said, I want to be the person that anybody can ask a question, and it's silly because I've been there. And people ask questions on my YouTube videos, and they say, well, how do I do this and how do I do that? And instead of saying, no, you don't do that, I try to think about where I was back in the day and that I'm open to anything. So at that point, now I'm really learning radios, and now I'm really learning about all this new technology. This hobby is something that has grown into far beyond any other hobby of evolution every day of things and people to learn and meet and do. And, now I've spread around with the YouTube videos and made a lot of people into ham radio hobbyists as well. And they all come back and say, hey, I had this interest watching your videos, and now I'm doing what you do. And that's the most rewarding thing I can think of.
So the deal is we want to talk a lot about Ham Radio Concepts, but we're going to get back to that in just a minute. Don't go away. If you just joined us, we're talking to KJ4YZI. He's right here at 5085, and we'll learn a little bit more about not only Ham Radio Concepts, but this year's field day right here on the big one. Big Jim Edwards here at 5085 WTWW Field Day weekend. Field Day has wrapped up for the year, but, a lot of you are getting ready for next year's Field Day. And, of course, one of the things all of us want to know is how can we keep up with the technology? And the technology changes so fast. Geez, when I was a kid, we had tubes and stuff like that. And now we're going into fancy integrated circuits and things that are way beyond my knowledge. But one of the cool things I get to do is to watch Eric, KJ4YZI's videos on the Ham Radio Concepts. And I'm fascinated by this. Tell me a little bit about how you started this and how many subscribers and what's a typical week for you with the Ham Radio Concepts?
Well, Jim, I have to say it's turned into a full-time adventure on YouTube. Making videos and learning about and trying to keep up with this technology is very, very hard because it evolves so fast. I started this video channel on YouTube with a simple Chinese handheld called a Baofeng radio. And I had ordered one on Amazon right before they became popular. And I said, I want to check this little $49 ham radio out. And 2 of them came in the mail by accident. So I emailed the seller on Amazon and I said, hey, I ordered this radio, and 2 of them came. Would you like me to send one back? And they said, no, just keep it. Our mistake. And I said, well, instead of just, having a mistake, how about I make a YouTube video and I show people about this radio that you're selling and what it can do, and I'll show you, everybody, and I'll direct them to where they can buy it and they can play with it. And he said, well, that would be good. So I made a video about this Baofeng radio, and fast forward 7 years, everybody knows what this radio is, and everybody knows how to play with it. So I made videos on how to program it, how to use it, what you can do with it, the range test on it, and this and that. And that inspired a lot of people to get into the hobby with a $49 radio at the time that may have not been the ultimate staple of quality in ham radio, but it was totally usable, it worked, and it got people interested because they didn't think that they had to spend their life savings on buying a radio to join in on the fun. And then that's as I call it, the gateway drug into ham radio. They get that, they get the feel of it, they put their feet in the water, they like it, they say, wow, how can I go farther? And with technology evolving, I check out other pieces that are more advanced and better than this. And the next thing you know, you're ending up with a closet full of radios and a room full of stuff, and things are just coming out, and it just turns into a lifelong hobby, and it's going to go wherever it's going to take me.
So the big question right now, how many people have seen your videos? Any idea?
Well, I think I have over 17 million views total, and I have 122,000 with some numbers, they change every day, 122,000 subscribers. At my peak, at some point last year, it was 50,000 views every 48 hours, and at the lowest, it was somewhere around, 10, 15,000 views per 48 hours. But there's new subscribers, anywhere from 800 to 2,000 subscribers a month that are joining to learn about this because they hear the word ham radio and they want to see what it is and what you can do. And that's why I like doing the videos.
Wonderful. Great story. In case you're just tuning in, Ham Radio Concepts, by the way, is found on YouTube with no spaces in between the words. It's HamRadioConcepts, which I think is not too bad for a guy who only had a second grade education. That's me. Listen, we'll be back a little bit more with Eric, KJ4YZI. You're listening to 5085 WTWW. 5085 WTWW. Big Jim Edwards here on Sunday night. The weekend is wrapped up now. Many of you about to hit the hay after being up for 48 hours straight. We were really, really lucky to be invited by the Vero Beach Amateur Radio Club to come out to their field day this year. And that's where we're broadcasting from. And with me is Eric, KJ4YZI. And as we mentioned, Eric is kind of a new ham to the hobby. But sometimes old technology is fun to learn. And I started with tube-type radios. I started actually with military surplus radios when I got into the hobby, 1,001 years ago. But Eric brought out a piece of vintage gear that he warmed up and actually is warm enough to probably cook breakfast on. What do you got over there in the shack tonight?
Well, I tell you, as somebody else was just using it, I went over and smelled it. I said, oh, yeah, cook those tubes. It's putting out some heat as they're talking. I picked up at a HamFest, Orlando HamFest 2019, I picked up a Galaxy GT550A, which has the word high gain on there. It's made by High Gain back in the day. And it is a fully tube radio with a transmitter receiver and built into one unit. And then it has an external power supply with the speaker built into that cabinet. And then they had other things like the external VFO and external tuning unit and stuff like that. It's a fully tube. And the reason I wanted to buy that first is because when I started in the hobby about 2004, so that was about, 16 years from now, the technology was already really big. We had internet-involved modes, and we had, very digital radios. But I jumped in then because of my age, but I got to miss all the fun stuff. Like Big Jim would play with, tubes and have to work on your own radios. So that stuff is only for the people that are brave enough to get into it. So after 15, 16 years of playing with this new stuff, I said, I want to go back and learn the old stuff because I hear about the stories that Jim tells and everybody else about the tube radios and talking to people with a light bulb as an antenna, and I want to learn about that. So I bought this radio, and I actually had to do a minor repair to get it fixed because the person that was selling it didn't know what was wrong with it. It was just a simple wire that needed to be soldered. And I got that soldered, and I turned it on, and the tubes glow, and the heat came on, and I was excited, and I started making contacts on it. But I want to go back now and learn where it came from, because if I don't know where it came from, I won't. For me, I want to appreciate where it came from to appreciate where it's at now. Because back in the day, you didn't buy stuff that was, non-serviceable by an average person. You had to build your stuff. You had to wind your own coils. You had to check your own tubes. You had to service your own radios, align it once in a while, and I want to be a part of that. So I said for this field day, I wanted to use a fully tube radio on portable generator power that will, require me to adjust the plate and the load. And then Jim got to sit with me and say, oh, well, Eric, you got to dip the plate, and you got to change the grid, and you got to adjust the load, and you got to get the maximum output with the minimum plate. And I learned right there the theory on tuning this radio and getting it operational for field day. And that is really a cool asset to it, that I got to play with a tube radio while everybody else got to play with this modern stuff. And they come in and they say, what's that? Where's the waterfall? Where's the spectrum analyzer? Where's all this digital filtering and voice processing? It doesn't exist here. And I still made contacts all over the country and all over the world with an old tube rig that might be 50 years old.
Great. We're going to have one more wrap up here with Eric, KJ4YZI, with us, the founder and the fellow who takes good care of HamRadioConcepts, and tonight is taking care of a very, very old radio. And who knows, in the morning he might cook breakfast on it. More later on The Big One. 5085 WTWW, Big Jim Edwards Show. Lucky enough to have in the studio with me Eric, KJ4YZI, who's had a great field day playing with new and old gear, mostly this weekend. Old gear, nice foot warmer kind of old gear. But looking to the future, and the guy that probably sees more and more of new gear walking through the door each and every day, because he does these great videos reviewing what's coming in the future. I don't know. I'm going to ask you, Eric, if you just kind of put your crystal ball in your lap here for just a second and be the magic genie and rub it just a little bit and tell me, what do you think we got to look forward to in amateur radio coming up in the not too distant future?
Wow. Well, I can't think right now of what the hobby would be like in the future, other than the fact that there's going to be so much technology. I hope it doesn't drift away from traditional radio, but I also see and hope with this technology, it attracts a younger crowd. A lot of the stuff that you can do with this hobby, will integrate. I mean, the radio I have now from a manufacturer has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on it. And I can control this radio from my phone while it's in the backpack on my back, or I can program it over Bluetooth or update it. And this kind of stuff will attract younger people because younger crowds these days don't even know, some of them don't even know what a tube is. And it's not their fault. It's just that, the tubes are gone 30, 40 years ago. And, having something new that looks fancy and it has all this communication potential where you can integrate and send pictures over radio. Like people are texting now. You can send pictures over radio. You can send emails over radio. I do it all the time. This kind of stuff will attract a younger audience and a younger user base. And I think that's what we need. And that's when I'm on the radio and I hear a younger person on the radio who may be just getting into it, I stop and focus only on taking that person and getting in contact with them, because that means more to me than just taking the old average person that just wants another contact. I hear somebody at a Boy Scouts on the Air or a Jamboree or somebody that's just getting in, and even if they sound afraid to get on the radio, I want to make sure that I'm one of their first contacts, because that's the youth we need in the hobby. And where it's going from here, I'm not sure, because it's evolving faster than I can even handle. But my saying, and this is my theory to end this, I never want to be an expert. I want to just keep learning every day, because as a friend told me, Pat, KI4LUI, the Christmas presents are always better when they're wrapped under the tree. Every day it's like opening a new Christmas present. And once you get that present and you say, well, okay, I'll move on. But if I am an expert at something like ham radio, I don't want to be an expert, because when you know everything and you get everything under your belt, it gets boring. I like to have something new every day that I want to learn, I have to learn, something that I've never seen, something that I have to put time into to master, and then share that with somebody else on a YouTube video so they can start an adventure learning about it as well.
Eric, all I can say is thank you so much, buddy, for all you've done for our hobby. You have really brightened up the YouTube channel with some of the best technical gear that I've ever had a chance to learn about, and what you've done for our hobby at your young age, man. We certainly appreciate it, and thanks for sharing this, the end of this wrap-up of this field day, and hopefully when we talk to you next year, we'll be able to look back and maybe you'll have, let's see, you had a tube gear this year. I don't know, next year Marconi might come to visit. If you never know, it could happen. So anyway, thanks, Eric. KJ4YZI. Check out his channel, Ham Radio Concepts, on YouTube.